Thank you for watching our YouTube channel. We really appreciate you taking the time. If you enjoy these videos, would you please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe? It really does help. Thank you very much.
What do you do when, and I'm sure everybody's gone through it, where everything's kind of seems to be going wrong, and you wonder where the heck is God in all this, where you're at the point where you can't even pray anymore. You're so upset about things.
Okay.
Have you been through that?
Well, I think everyone goes through times where you're wondering what's going on and why things are happening, for sure.
Yeah.
I think I guess the place in the Bible where that's most evident is in the Psalms. And in the Psalms, you've got three different sorts of Psalms. You've got Psalms where everything is wonderful and praise God, everything's great. And then you get Psalms where everything's not wonderful and it's like, God, where are you? What are you doing? You know, Psalm 3 is one of those. David was like, is David king, man after God's own heart, and there's his own son trying to kill him.
Yeah.
And all the people are saying, oh, God won't save you. You're not good enough. Yeah, you have all this sort of nonsense going on. And there's David. So what does he do? Cries out to God. God, where are you? All these people are saying, you're not there. You're not going to work sort of for me. And Absalom was trying to kill him. He was on the run with a band of guys sort of trying to escape. And he cries out to God, First of all, with that, well, where are you? And people are saying you're not there, but then sort of shifts gear to say, well, okay, but I believe you are there, even though it might not appear to be true. I believe you are there because even when I can't see you, you're still good. You never change. My perception of you, because I'm looking at my circumstances, I'm seeing you, God, through my circumstances. Therefore, it appears you're not there and you're not working for me and things are going bad. And therefore, why? And I understand people saying that. I mean, when I went through the first stages of, where my wife basically said she didn't want to be married anymore, I went through the same thing. It's like, okay, this can't be right. Where are you? What are you going to do about this? But in the end, it was like, okay, I haven't got anywhere else to turn. I do believe you're good, even though this doesn't appear to be good. This circumstances doesn't appear to be good. But ultimately, God is not sovereign over everything that people do to stop them doing things that affect you. And when people choose to do negative things or things go wrong because of people generally, I mean, it's generally people who are the problem, God can't just say, stop doing that. You're not allowed to. And in Psalm 3, David basically comes, I believe you're there. Then he says, right, get them, God, smack them in the mouth, break their teeth, slap them on the face, get them back. Because, I want you to take this vengeance on my behalf. Mm-hmm. Well, of course, I don't think God is ever going to respond and smack people and break their teeth. But figuratively, you can stop he was basically, I think, sort of saying, hey, stop the negativity, stop the lies. I don't, all these things, do something about it. Well, what happened? In that story, what happened was that Absalom, in his pride and everything else, got caught up in a tree and sort of died. Now, did God do that? No. Absalom did that because of his pride and his arrogance and his lies and everything else. That opened him up to the negativity. So when negative things happen and when things are, where is God in this? I can't pray. Well, that's okay. God knows your heart anyway, and he loves you anyway, and God is good, and he wants to bring good out of every situation there is. But that doesn't mean bad things don't happen. For bad things never to happen, that means everybody in the world would never do something bad. And that just isn't going to happen instantly, is it? So you've then got to work in, okay, when something bad happens, that's when I need to put my trust in God, because where else am I going to go? I can try and figure it out myself. I can try and do things myself, but usually when I do things myself, it tends to make it worse rather than better. So ultimately, that's when I throw myself onto God. I cast all my burdens onto God and say, okay, over to you. I go to the throne of grace. I sit on his lap. I tell him how I feel, and I trust that he is going to bring good out of those situations. Now, there may be situations where, let's say, the enemy is coming against us, where God can still the storm. But ultimately, we need to learn to live in the eye of the storm, which means when there are storms going all around us and everything appears to be bad, we are still in peace and rest, which is easier said than done. I totally agree, but ultimately, when you know that God is good, he loves you unconditionally, then you trust him, because what other option have you got anyway? If you don't trust him, is that going to make it any better? No. When I was going through my dark cloud experience and I couldn't hear God, I couldn't feel him, I couldn't sense him, everything seemed to be terrible. I got to the point where I gave up trying to understand what was going to happen. I gave up asking for an answer. Why? I stopped asking why. And I began to come to the point where, okay, I don't understand this. If I never understand it, okay, but I choose to trust you anyway. And in that, actually, when I did truly surrender my soul's right to understand, to know, to figure it out, to be part of it, then he was able then to bring me into a place of peace and rest, because I gave up trying to do it myself. See, what do we do when we're at rest? We're trusting in his love, mercy, grace in the situation. Now, ultimately, when you're in the midst of it, it's not as easy as looking back in hindsight, then looking back to what happened and seeing how God brought us through it or brought us in out of it. But when you're in the midst of it, all you can do is basically cast your burdens onto him and trust him, because what else is there to do? And I think that's where even the disciples, where Jesus was saying, well, are you going to leave me? And they said, well, where can we go? You've got the words of eternal life. We can't go nowhere else. We don't understand why this is happening. Don't understand what's going on, but where else can we go? It's like they were as bemused as anyone else when he said, eat my flesh, drink my blood. And they would also have found it like, whoa, this can't be right, because you're not allowed blood under the law. But they realized that even though they didn't understand, they trusted that Jesus did, and that what he meant must have been good, because he is good. And I think that's where the situations are. And I think sometimes you just got to stop trying to pray, stop trying to figure it out, stop trying to get an answer which is the answer you want, and just hand it over to God and say, God, over to you. And usually that's when we're at the end of our tether and the end of our rope. We just need to learn to do it earlier and not try and figure it out and understand it and put it right and trying to fix it and try and do everything we can do in our own strength, and basically come to the point where, okay, God, I don't understand. I can't do this, but I trust you will. Don't know how you're going to do it. I don't know what good you're going to bring out of this, because some of these things seem impossible for good to get out of them. But eventually, when you look back, you will see God will have done something, even if it's to redeem the situation so that you can understand other people going through situations like that. And ultimately, when I gave up the sort of, okay, God, why are you not doing something? Can't you do something about this? I came to a place where I was at peace, even though the situation didn't change. And if the situation doesn't change, I can change in the situation. And that's ultimately what God wants to do, to bring me to a place of peace and rest whilst I'm going through a difficult situation that I can't understand, I can't figure out, and I can't fix. I can still live at peace and rest in the midst of it. Now, that isn't easy because our soul gets in the way and our emotions get in the way, usually with fear, worry, anxiety, and of those negative emotions, which are lower frequency emotions, which lower our whole body frequency, which makes us feel even worse and opens us up even to other negative things, because we're drawing negative things to us because we're feeling negative. And it's hard when, we're worrying and we're anxious, but ultimately, what good does worry do? Just worrying about it isn't going to change it. It just makes us feel worse about it.
But when you're doing things and it seems like, okay, God's in charge here, he's got this, he did this, he did this. And then all of a sudden it's like it blows up in your face and you think, I thought you were part of all this. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, but that's not to say he isn't. That he's not there. I mean, it's that thing where, the footprints in the sand. Well, there's only one set of footprints. Where did you go? Well, that was when I was carrying you. And sometimes we have to put our trust into him and stop trying to understand and figure it out and work it out. And where are you, God? It's okay to voice that to him, but ultimately you've got to trust that he is there, even when it appears that he isn't, because that's what brings you the peace and rest. Actually sharing how you feel is okay, because that is real, being real and honest, but you don't want to stay feeling like that. And the only way not to feel that way is to come to a place where you do trust that he's there, even though it doesn't feel like it. Because then you can live as if he is, because he is. It's our understanding, our thinking, the way we see things, which is not seeing God in the situation. Because he guarantees never to leave us or forsake us. That's a promise that he won't ever break. So if that's the promise, then everything else can't be true, which appears to show that that promise isn't true. Because I know God is not going to break his promise. When I was going through difficulties, I had to come to the point where I stopped trying to understand it, figure it out, and try and change it. And come to the point of, okay, God, what is this situation? What should I be doing? And ultimately, I felt nothing. You can't do anything here other than keep your heart right. Now, in a situation where things are going wrong and it's other people who are affecting us, our heart towards them needs to be filled with unconditional forgiveness. Because if we're angry and bitter and resentment towards what people are doing, that puts us in the torturer's hands, and the torturer will make us feel even worse. Because we'll feel even worse about the situation because we're now being internally manipulated by anger or bitterness or resentment or unforgiveness or all those negative emotions. So the first thing I always do when I'm in a situation where something is going wrong or someone is doing something which I don't feel is fair or isn't right or is clearly wrong, whether they're lying about me, whether they're doing something negative to me, whatever it might be, my first reaction is I'm going to choose to forgive them. Not because they deserve it, but because I'm not going to be controlled by the emotions that are attached to unforgiveness and anger and bitterness. So I choose to do that, and I then release them. Then I'm not feeling towards them what I was before, now it's much easier to see God in the situation. When we're angry and bitter and unforgiving, it's really hard to feel God in that situation because our emotions are completely opposite to that which God wants us to experience. So that's my first step in any situation. I'm going to choose to forgive and release.
Yeah,
And
which is hard
once
to
I've
do.
done that, then when my heart is right, that enables me then to reconnect to the peace and rest that I have in God. Because I can't be at peace and at rest if I'm angry or bitter or resentful. I can't, because those emotions are negative, low frequency emotions. And they'll just make me feel worse and worse.
Like, I realize that that we are actually wired to anticipate the future. Like in any circumstances, every decision that we're making, we there's a desired outcome that we want in all kinds of circumstances. And so the brain is always anticipating the future. And so in these circumstances, it could come in what Bill and Deb are facing now. It could come in sickness. It could come in bankruptcies or anything. And we always anticipate the worst because that's how we get into overdrive. And sometimes you realize that you cannot predict the outcome of any event. What you're saying is that in the end, you realize that God is the only predictor of events, and He's the ultimate source of everything. And when you reach out to Him, so when the Bible says, "Blessed are they who mourn," this is what He's talking about. The ultimate outcome is His goodness. So, whatever the circumstances are now, the desired outcome will be totally different from what we anticipate all the time, and we anticipate the worst. That's just my 2 bits.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, when we deal with our emotions and we deal with our attitude and our feelings towards what's going on, that removes the immediate, negativity around it. And it's hard to actually feel positive when you're negative. It's just really difficult because you're going through. And I know when things don't seem fair or they seem unjust, injustice is a very strong emotion. What did I do to deserve this? But when I go through it, first thing I do is to forgive and release. The second thing I do is to go to God and say, have I contributed to this in any way? If so, what can I do to put that right? Because sometimes, and it's not always, but sometimes what I've done is opened a door for something negative to happen. Therefore, I've got to close that door. And sometimes that might be my negative attitude or worry or anxiety, fear. I mean, fear opens a door all the time. What you fear can come upon you. So am I fearful of what's in the past? Have I been fearful of what's been going on? But injustice is quite a strong emotion. It's not fair. I don't deserve this. But when we're operating in those emotions, they are producing a frequency which is not good. And then they attract other negative emotions to it. So ultimately, my only course of thing in it is deal with my own heart towards anybody else. Make sure that my heart is right. And if it hasn't been right in the past, then I'm going to put that right. And then I'm just going to throw myself onto God. Cast all your burdens on the Lord and leave them there. Now, that's hard to do, because particularly when it's like, well, yeah, but it's unfair. Well, okay, it isn't fair. It wasn't fair that Jesus went to the cross, but he did. And God brought something good out of it. It wasn't fair that people whipped him and beat him, and it wasn't fair. It wasn't justice. It was man's vengeance provoked by the enemy, but it wasn't justice. But God, in the end, brought good out of the situation. even though it was a terrible thing that happened. Now, in my own situation, I couldn't see the good that could come out of the breakdown of my marriage. I couldn't see the good. I chose to forgive and release. I also looked at, actually, I've contributed to this. Therefore, I've got to learn from this. If that's the case, if I've not been the best husband I could be, if I've not been emotionally there, if I've not been that to someone and they are reacting that, well, then, okay, I can say sorry for that. And I've got to learn from that. So I ask God, change me so I can be there emotionally. So change me so I can be in that situation. So in the end, okay, I trust God. The situation isn't going to change. Okay, God, I accept it. Bring me to a place where I am at peace in that, even though I don't want that to be the case, but I accept it is going to be the case. Okay, I'm now in a place where I'm at a point of acceptance. Eventually, obviously, God brings something better out of that situation that I could have ever imagined or thought. And I guess there aren't too many situations stronger than marriage breakdown or losing a child or family member. They're sort of things that are on par with it. Obviously, maybe, losing a job or things. There are other things which obviously in life are very difficult situations. I couldn't see how God could possibly bring something good out of that situation other than be there for me and help me to get over it. But ultimately, he gave me someone who I was able to love, be there for, and is there in a relationship which is better than I ever imagined or thought. I wouldn't have chosen that route to bring me into a place of happiness, but God brought good out of that situation. Now I'm happy. So ultimately, that was as bad a situation, I guess, as I've ever been in my life. And now I'm happier than I've ever been in my life. Now, I can't say that I enjoyed going through a year of misery like that and going through that difficulty and going through having to work all that through and keep my heart right and sometimes getting angry and all of the emotions that come up in a situation like that. Did I enjoy that? Absolutely not. But God was there. Even then, it didn't feel that this was fair or what I wanted or even what I think God wanted. Did God want the breakdown of my previous marriage? No. But also, did he want me to be unhappy for the rest of my life? No. So in one sense, going through the hard, difficult situation enabled me to change to a degree that I was then able to enter into a relationship which brought me happiness. Hard is hard, and I look back and say, okay, I don't understand everything, but God, you're good.
Go ahead.
But if I look at your situation, Mike, when I in my limited mindset, I looked at it as what you went through as a situation, what you valued on earth, which was Debbie and your life with her all those years from a teenager up to now, the family and all the things, building the ministry and all the things you'd gone through together. Actually, what God did is he broke and removed from you all of that past in your life so that you had nothing left. It was a complete breaking of you, which is really, I guess, one of the things that has to happen, I guess, in the end, that everything is just God anyway. And so it wasn't necessarily whether you're with Debbie or not, or with the new Debbie. It was actually that was the process you had to go through in order to be completely, totally with God.
Probably
and then rebuilding that. And it was for your good.
Yeah.
But it was terrible.
It didn't feel
suffering of this age, is that worthy to be compared to?
Yeah. It doesn't feel like it though when you're going through it.
But that's what he did, didn't he?
Yeah.
Really?
He did. Yeah.
He broke you of everything on this earth.
Yeah. Yeah. In a sense, did he do that? And was he responsible for that? No, because someone else chose to end the relationship. But I couldn't see that there could have been something outside of the commitment I made. I made a commitment. I was going to stick to it no matter what. And it wasn't until I said, okay, I can't stick to this because someone else won't let me stick to it, that, okay, I come to accept that this is the end of that. Did God do that? No, but God did bring good out of it. Could God have restored that relationship? Yeah, he could have done. He would have had to have changed me. He would have had to have changed Deb. If they would have had to change. I would have had to change. Is that possible? Yes. But she didn't want it to happen. Therefore, it didn't happen. I'm not saying we didn't try lots of times, in a sense. But ultimately, then God said, okay, in this situation, I am going to bring something good out of it. And it was something which was not I was looking for. I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't even anticipating it or asking for it. But God gave it me anyway. And now I am happy. Would I say it was worth going through all that for the happiness that I have now? Yeah, I would, because I've never been so happy, in a sense, in that sense. But
are you happy because you changed, though? Because you went through, and you could have been happy before if you had changed back then. In other words, you had to go through this to understand it, to make changes within you, or allow God to make changes within you.
Maybe if both of us had changed. Because in that experience, who I am did not seem to be able to be released. I couldn't be myself in that relationship. That's what it felt like. So I didn't really know myself as a husband in that situation. I just had my past and the story and the history and everything else. I didn't know who I was in that situation. So whatever the relationship was, and the, I guess, dysfunctionality of that relationship, meant it was really difficult for me to be the person I am now. Have I changed, or am I just the person that I always was intended to be, but couldn't be in that relationship? Because it takes two people to make a relationship work. And it takes someone loving someone in a way that encourages that person to be who they are, and the reciprocal being in place. And for whatever reason, we were unable to do that. And so I didn't know who I was. I thought that I was as a person, I struggled in that sort of relationship, whatever else. I did my best. I tried to be there, but actually, when I entered into this relationship, it wasn't that I'm going to change, I'm going to be different. I just was different in that I was able to love and to care and to be thoughtful and to be generous and to be caring and to all those things that would have been exactly what the previous relationship should have been. But none of those things were, I guess, what you could say, drawn out of me or encouraged in me. I don't know, but they didn't happen. I'm not blaming my ex-wife. But in this relationship, it was just like I felt I could be me and be kind and caring and thoughtful and all those emotional things that people want. It wasn't hard. I didn't have to think, right, okay, I am going to be determined to be this sort of person. I just found that I discovered who I really was, which I didn't discover in that previous relationship for whatever reason. And I discovered who I really was, who God always intended me to be. Now, I don't think he changed me as much as revealed me. Because I just felt absolutely like this is who I've always been. It was just a weird thing in that situation. Now, I don't think ever I got to the point where in this relationship that I thought, okay, I must do this, I must do this, I must do this, I just was able to, in a very normal and natural way, which I was never able to before. So
it's harder though when like this would include our granddaughter, and I find it hard because she's always going back to the situation that she's in, and I feel she should be with her dad, but she's with her mom, and the mom's not altogether there.
Yeah,
I find it really hard because how do you protect that child?
well, ultimately you can't. It's not your responsibility to.
Yeah.
You can obviously want the best. You can make declarations of goodness and protection. You can assign angels to the situation, but ultimately you got to trust that God will bring that person through that situation in the end, unharmed and healed and whole and everything else. And ultimately, God can't make people do the things that you want them to do, because that's manipulation and control, and God doesn't control people. No, hopefully the situation will change, and maybe circumstances will change, and maybe decisions will change. But in the midst of it, that's when you've got to keep your heart right to everybody and have the right attitude towards everybody, maintain that, but don't get into fear either. It's like, well, how can I protect? Because essentially that's what Job did. I'm going to sacrifice an offer every day just to protect my children and make sure nothing ever happens to them. Well, he was doing that not out of faith. He could have done that by trusting God. Hey, God, I hand all my children over to you. Bless them. He didn't. He thought he had to do this and this and this. Then God would be able to do it. And what he did, he opened the door for all of the stuff that he feared to happen anyway. So don't be motivated by fear in the situation, because fear is not going to help. And I understand you feel towards your granddaughter, you feel that perhaps you want a situation to change, but in it, it's like if you're fearful that she is some way going to end up completely messed up, screwed up for the rest of her life, you got to let go of that fear and trust that God will bring good out of this, that God will reveal who she is to her, that she can eventually find out and discover her identity in God. And many children and people have gone through difficult situations that when they come through it, ultimately things are brought to a sense of wholeness and purpose and healing and all that stuff. But it's not easy at the time. And sometimes you obviously can't see how that can happen. And in your situation, well, it's never going to happen if she's with her mother. Well, if you are declaring and thinking that, you're creating an environment where that's more likely to happen. Change the way you're thinking. God, I want her to be blessed in this situation with her mother. I'm trusting that she is going to come through this situation with her mother, rather than it's like, oh, this is going to be damaged. It's going to start changing your way of thinking towards the situation that there is at present. It may well change, but at the present, actually change the negativity towards it. Because it's not doing any good, is it? It's not doing you any good. It's not doing her any good. It's not doing anyone any good. So ultimately, therefore, if it's not doing any good, in this event, stop doing that. And you have to, in some sense, get a hold of, okay, my thinking has to change. I'm not going to operate in fear. I am going to make a declaration, and I'm going to trust in this situation, your goodness is going to be seen, that her angels are going to protect her, that she is going to be safe and secure, that you are her high tower and you are her shield and you are her protector. So make the declarations of the positive rather than the fear of the negative. You know, because I think then you are doing what you can do to maintain a positive attitude towards the situation, and you're trusting that God is going to protect her in it. But I know it's not easy. You know, I've been through situations with children and grandchildren and things, and you just feel, you know, what's going on? Why is this happening? You know, but ultimately, you know, you can only do what you can do. You can't directly interfere or change the situation because it's not actually within your purview to do it. You can't ride in there and steal her away as much as you might want to, but you can't, because then you'd end up in a situation where it would be much worse, you know. And in one sense, obviously you have to encourage your dad also to have the right positive attitude towards the situation, so he's not filled with anger, bitterness, resentment as well, which will bring negativity into the situation. I know it's not easy, because obviously those are the initial emotions you begin to feel, but they're destructive emotions, and they won't do anything. And if he is negative towards the mother to the child, that will create even more problems. You know, and I know it's hard not to be, but if you then start to project your anger towards, you know, I guess his wife in the situation, then that's what the child is going to feel, and the child is going to feel caught in the middle. And generally, children tend to take the blame. So they'll think it's my fault, which is the last thing you want them to feel, because obviously it isn't their fault. But a lot of children in those situations blame themselves for divorce, separation, and other things. So, you know, encourage your son not to, you know, to keep his attitude right in it and not sort of project to his daughter.
Mike, when you get it, what I get is contrast in what you're asking for with God. For example, in what Debbie's talking about, Children's Aid has become involved talking to the daughter, and they've opened a full investigation into the mother because of the harm they think is coming to the child. Because the mother has borderline personality disorder, which is crazy. Yeah. And she's doing all kinds of crazy things, and the daughter is talking to them. Am I asking God to, there's the one side, like, bless the mother and bless their situation with the child, with the mother, or am I saying, God, go in there and blow the whole bloody thing up, reveal the truth, darn it? I see, and it's almost like a contrast of negative and positive, and I get kind of confused in the whole situation.
Yeah, well, you want righteousness and justice, but they're based on mercy. So you want the mercy and grace of God to be demonstrated in that situation, which will bring about the best for everybody in the long run. And if something has gone wrong, and if the mother's done certain things or whatever because of mental health issues and everything else, you want her to be whole. You know, you don't want her to be operating out of brokenness, because that is affecting the child. If she wasn't operating that way, then perhaps there will be a change. So ultimately, yes, you want truth to be seen so that the child is, in a sense, not at risk, but you also have to look at it from God is as equally concerned for the mother as he is for the child, because he loves both of them the same. And if the mother is suffering because of mental health and personality disorders, then God would want to bring her into health and wholeness. In the midst of that, wanting to protect the child from the damage that can cause. You know, so you want the truth to be seen so that something can be done to bring change into the situation, but you've got to do it not out of vengeance or anger or frustration, but out of wanting the best for everyone in the situation. So in this situation, you don't want to treat her as the enemy, because God isn't. God loves her equally as much as he loves everybody. And that's because he's unconditionally loving. It's not based on her performance. It's based on who she is. And she doesn't know, obviously, who she is. If she's got personality disorders, she's obviously don't know her true identity. You know? So helping her find that true identity. And so I would be, yeah, God, help her to know who she is. Help her to discover that reality so she's not suffering with mental health. But on the other side of it, I know that you can think, right, if all the truth comes out, they'll take her away from her, and she won't ever get her back. You know, well, actually, you want, let's say there's an irreconcilable difference between the husband and wife, and that isn't going to change, then you want them to both have a positive input into that relationship in the future, to be a mother, because she needs a mother and she needs a father. She needs a good mother and she needs a good father. So you want both. You want that is the ultimate result. Whether that is reconciliation, if reconciliation is not possible, then you want a good father and a good mother to have at least a relationship in which they can share that parenting their child, even if they're not together. So that would be how I would look into the situation. And I'd be careful that I wouldn't want, you know, I want the truth because, you know, it's our motive and what's going on in our desire for the truth, which is the issue. You know,
the urgent motion that was heard was that the mother had to go into therapy and get help in order to be what we hope to be good with the child and with her partner. But the fact is that it got into the part where the judge didn't really see it the same way because they felt bad. What came out is the judge actually felt bad for a person with a mental illness and didn't want to shadow the person.
Yeah.
They're pulling the child away, even though atrocious things were happening and were on record from psychologists.
Yeah.
So because of the way our bloody court system works now in the woke movement that we're in, and in my feeling, that's just my mindset that maybe has to be fixed. Yeah. But the fact is that to me and to the two different psychologists, the safety of the child was paramount because they're an innocent victim. So it wasn't necessarily what's right for the mother, what's right for the father, and what's in the interest of the child. Both psychologists were on record with the court saying the child is going to be mentally damaged within another 4 or 5 years being with the mother. So, and that the issue with borderline personality disorder was it can't be fixed. There's no cure.
But we know that's not true.
Well, we know it's true with God, but we know it's probably not true with pharmaceutical companies.
Well, yeah, it's not going to be fixed by medication probably, but it can be fixed with people coming into and the true understanding of who they really are. That can be fixed. Obviously, you want to do what you can to protect that child. And I think to do that is keeping your attitude towards that positive. Don't get into fear. Make the positive declarations and engagement with it to protect her from the best you can do, and encourage your son to do the same. You know, so that the whole situation is covered with the love of God, in that then you want God to do and bring the best out of it. Now, ultimately, you know, there might need to be a judicial review, and that judgment may need to be changed. You know, but that's where you've got to say, okay, God, until that happens, or until she gets into a situation where she's behaving differently, then you want to see the child protected. You want her not to be damaged, and you want to make the sort of that positive intention towards that situation, so that you're in positively intended she won't be damaged, that God is protecting her, that she will be shielded from mental health issues. So don't accept the prognosis of the psychologist. Just like, you know, if you were diagnosed with cancer, would you be accepting the prognosis you're going to die? No, you'd be saying, no, that's not God's intention for me. it isn't God's intention that she will be struggling, had mental health issues as a result of this herself. She will be damaged. Don't agree with that. Protect her from your way of declaring and decreeing and trusting God for God's provision and protection of her in this situation. I'm not agreeing with a psychologist, which is the outcome that I don't want. It may be correct, but doesn't mean it has to happen. Because that's where God can still bring good into the situation and will protect as a high tower and a shield. And you have some measure of authority with your son in this situation to bring about the blessing of covenant in family. Just don't get caught up in the fear. And I wouldn't be agreeing with a psychologist's estimation. It might be true, but it doesn't have to be the fact of the outcome, because God can protect even when it's in a very difficult situation like that. And I appreciate it must be really, really hard for you. And ultimately, I know all the emotions and all the stuff, when you look at it and you look at sort of the decisions that are made and you look at all these things and you try and figure it all out, and ultimately you just think, well, where's God? Well, God is there, and you bring God into it. Don't exclude him from it. Because if you're angry with him that he's not there doing what you think he should have done, then that's not going to be helpful. Call him into the situation. Make the declarations of safety and security and blessing and protection into the situation. And, definitely don't agree with the psychologist's outcome, because that does not have to take place, even if, the mother doesn't change.
It seemed like God was in the whole thing, because the way we got the lawyer and everything, it was like, okay, God's in this, we thought, and then
he still is.
fell apart.
He still is. It's just your view of what the outcome should be is not necessarily what happens in life. Things don't always go absolutely to the thing that we think they should do. God is still in the situation, and make sure he's still in the situation by including him in the situation and trusting him in the situation for his promises to be fulfilled. He promises to look after little ones. Make sure that you're trusting him for those promises. But if you're thinking, well, God's not in this, that's not going to help you actually trusting that God is in it.
Or where are you, God, sort of thing.
Well,
like you thought you were there.
Where are you? But where are you? You're saying that because you didn't get the result that you thought should have happened. If it had happened the way you thought, and your son got custody, then you would have thought, God, thank you.
Yeah.
You're in this. Because you've done what I thought you should do. But not always. I mean, God can't make the judge make a decision. You can't manipulate the judge. The judge has made a judicial verdict based on what he thought was the best. I'm sure he didn't do it for harm, but as you say, he may well have put too much weight on the mother's mental health stuff. But what would have happened, how would you feel if, let's say, the custody had gone the other way and then the mother committed suicide? If that would have thrown up, where were you in that, God? It's very difficult. And so in hindsight, you can only look back and see, because you don't know what would have happened if it had gone the other way. So you've got to see, okay, God, I'm going to trust you in this. And I'm going to believe your protection, your blessing is going to be on that child, and you are going to keep her safe in this situation. And we want good to come out of this. And therefore, I'm not saying you shouldn't be saying, hey, we want to see the situation change for the best. But I don't know always what the best is. because I'm only looking from a limited perspective. I'm not seeing always the bigger picture. And I got to trust that God does see a bigger picture and will always want to bring the best out of a situation. But it is hard. I understand it's hard.
You know what blew me up, Mike, on say our situation, because we're asking God what to do.
Yeah.
I know, and I realize our mindset is we kind of figure out what we should do. But in this situation, on the long weekend in July, she wouldn't allow her to see her husband, or to which she had agreed to do. And they'd only broken up for a matter of a few weeks, or for Father's Day. And she was using the kid as a pawn, the 6-year-old. And she randomly dropped them all off with some strangers she met on the internet for the long weekend. The child was despondent. This child kept saying she wanted to see her dad. So this lady arranged with her mother to contact her father that her daughter could have FaceTime with her father. When the father spoke to her, the child just broke down. I was there with my other 2 sons, totally despondent. And he said, Daddy's going to try to help you. He said, Daddy, you can't help me. Nobody can. The lady came on afterwards and said her son had talked to her mother, or to her 5-year-old, and said that her mother was bad. She said during the night, she came into the lady's room and said, can I sleep with you for comfort? I don't want to go back to my mommy. If I have to go back, if I can't go back to my daddy, can I stay with you all summer? We talked to the lawyer, and the 2 psychologists said, go down and get her. We'll give you a cover. Don't return her. I don't care if you have to grab her out of the place. We arranged to pick her up, which the mother agreed with, and she pulled it at the last minute. We went there when we're 15 minutes from the place, and we turned around and we went to the apartment anywhere where she was staying. The mother happened to be there. She opened the door and said, go away. You can't have her. Shut the door. The daughter unlocked the door, started crying. I hear my daddy. Mother locked the door again. She unlocked it. She ran on her daddy's arms and left. Police came. She talked to the police, and they were happy and thought my son was great. And she explained how I opened the door and this and that. And they said, hold on to her. They went into hiding, Debbie and her, for 28 days, as advised by the lawyer. They FaceTimed the mother every day. When it finally got to court, the night before, the lawyer, we've got this, blah, blah, blah. I've got
to stick up for you.
I have on record confidential discussions that she's had with both 2 different psychologists, 122 and 123, where she's disclosed all these crazy things she's doing with the daughter, inebriated when she's alone, terrible things that were going on. Yeah. The judge, first thing he did was he threw out both reports, a female, and then she turned around, and that was the whole case. The lawyer thought, I don't need anything else. And then she was just tore my son apart, limited. He can't talk to her during the week. He gets to see her every alternate weekend from Saturday from 10 till 10 o'clock, Saturday till 5 o'clock. The judge turned around and said, and if you don't have all this, I'm going to have the police involved in that. It's terrible how you took her away from her mother and this and that. The whole thing was on the advice and counsel of the 2 lawyers and 2 psychologists. And we're going, what went wrong here, God? Everything came together. We went through all this for nothing. And now she's talking with her mother. She was here. We had her for the first time in 14 days. She made a birthday wish with my family. And then she said, let me tell you the wishes.
Yeah.
It was, why can't I be with my daddy? And you know what? You're sitting there, and when she said or she says to grandma, why do I have to go back to this bad place? And you're sitting there, God, where the hell are you?
Yeah, no, I understand that. And it must be really, really difficult. Ultimately, where is God? Where God is in the situation if you bring him into it. But if that judge made a wrong verdict, is there a way of appealing? Is there an appeal process with another judge? Can it be reviewed? Is there a review process? You don't have to give up. You can still look to pursue the situation to bring about good, but it's like, okay, I accept. Well, in that, it'd be like, I don't understand why this happened, because this is not the best. But ultimately, when you get to these situations, it's like, I don't understand everything. And sometimes it's got to say, I don't know why this happened the way it did. And it seemed, God, that you were not in it. But God can't make the judge make a decision. God can't manipulate anybody, including us, to do what we want them to do. So you've got to do the best in the situation that you've got now. If you keep looking back what happened, and you keep focusing on the judge, and you're angry with the judge, and the judge, that ain't going to help either. So it's like, deal with it. If you felt, yeah, I need to forgive that judge because that judge operated wrongly, in my perspective, I'm going to release that judge and forgive him or for her, whatever. Get your heart right, and then look to, okay, God, what do we do now? What can we do to keep her safe in this situation? Because that's primarily what you want right now.
Yes.
You want her safe. That is, irrespective of getting revenge on the judge or he made a whatever,
Or the lawyer.
get it. What is it to get her safe? How can she be protected? How can she be safe in the situation? And I think that's what your primary thing needs to do. To do that, you need to make sure your heart are right in the whole situation. Otherwise, you're only going to see it through a skewed way of looking at it. And you'll see it through anger, and you'll see it through that. And I'm not saying you didn't have a right to be angry. Emotions are emotions.
Well, what was just anger, Mike? It was like we went through this on the advice and counsel of 2 lawyers and 2 psychologists, and the stress, Debbie, I know, and just I went through, and I had the police here a number of times because they kept checking me for coming to check me for guns and things like that, things that are being reported.
Ridiculous.
The police the first couple of times were slugs, and by the end of it were really nice because they got to know me.
Yeah.
And talk to the child, and she explained what was going on and this and that, and they were really good. By the end of it, by the 5th check, they were really nice over the 28 days. But the fact is, I was thinking, God, we went through all this for what? Because we accomplished nothing. The situation is worse now than it was. At least you could have checked in before. And now the judges looked at it like, you tried to go in and take matters into your own hands and blah, 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 blah. And he didn't. It was on the advice of 2 lawyers, which we have on recordings because I recorded every conversation we had because you never know from my experience at work, people say things and they go, oh, I didn't really say that.
Yeah, no, I accept that. But ultimately, that judge has taken a different view to the lawyers who basically advise you to do that. So basically, they gave you wrong advice in regards to this judge.
They did.
Essentially. That's the situation.
The strategy was totally
wrong advice in this situation. It may not have been wrong advice per se, but in this situation, the judge has taken that as you took this child from the mother.
Yes.
And that judge is basically saying that's wrong in every circumstance, basically. Therefore, no matter what advice you got, I don't accept that. And unfortunately, court systems and everything else seem to be the judge is the arbiter of everything.
The judge is God.
Yeah, in a situation like that. And unfortunately, you got a judge who wasn't sympathetic to listen to the advice that you were given. Which is tough. I understand how tough it must feel.
Well, how crazy it was.
You made it worse.
Well, the night before, the mother said, okay, you could pick her up for $300, changed her mind. And when we did get her, when the daughter opened the door and they ran, which is insane. I thought 70-year-olds, and Debbie's running through the parking lot with the child with my son. And I'm standing in the doorway blocking. The mother so she can't get out. She's going to call the police. I'm saying, go ahead and call the police. But when we left, she said, okay, now that you've got her, I don't want $300, I want $600. Like the whole thing was never about the child. It was using the child as a pawn. And yet the judge wouldn't listen to that. And I'm thinking, what's wrong with you? How stupid can you be?
And the lawyer didn't even say that he told us to do it.
He can't
do that. He just, I don't even want to pay him.
The final fee.
Well, they all cover their own backs, don't they? So
yeah, they did in the end. We've talked to some other lawyers, and they want us to take legal action. And I said, I don't want to do that. I just want to get the situation corrected against the existing lawyer.
Yeah. No, I understand. It must be really difficult.
So we're saying, well, what a mess this is in, God. Was I just wasting my time with you?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but you're taking the attitude of, well, God can fix everything and change people. He cannot do that unless people cooperate with him.
Yeah, but it seems like everything we did went wrong. Felt at the end.
And yet
Yeah.
we felt God was guiding us through the whole thing.
But that's only
Debbie
way
said to me the
right
day
now.
before the judgment started, before we had the hearing at 10 o'clock, and she took the daughter, the 6-year-old away, and my son and I were there for the Zoom call with the judge and everyone else. And I said, I'm hearing from God, everything's going to be okay. And then afterwards, I said to her that night, I said, boy, I don't hear.
But ultimately, you're still only looking at it in a very short period of time.
Yes.
You're not looking at it in a year's time, looking back and seeing what happened, which is why it's hard when you're only looking at the point of time you're in at the moment. If that changes, you may well think differently about the situation. And that's all one can say in it, because we haven't got the thing of looking forward 12 months and seeing where that will be then. You can look back and say, okay, now maybe I can understand what was going on because now this has happened. But I understand it must be really hard.
And now, because we lost the motion, I have to pay their legal costs, which goes to court September the 1st. So instead of cost me about 15, 16, it's going to cost me about 35,000. I haven't even started to the next round.
Yeah.
It's just insane.
Because our son can't afford it.
Which is, I don't mind because it's the right thing to do, but it's like a never ending thing. And this is going to be, any other lawyer would say, I'm going to be a marathon because it's mental illness involved.
Yeah.
So we're talking 2 or 3 years down the road and you're thinking, this is insane. And at the end, what's going to happen anyway? Do we end any further ahead?
Well, this is where you've got to get your headspace into a positive mental attitude and intention that yes, it will. Yes, it will be further ahead. Yes, things will change, and yes, things will get better. And have that view, because worrying and thinking the negative isn't going to make it any better, is it? So actually, take your position, get your heads right, get your emotions right, and then make the declarations and decrees and positive thinking towards it will be better. It is going to get resolved. It will sort itself out. You know, then
even in your situation,
you're declaring and choosing a reality which is aligned with what you believe is the best thing, rather than thinking, "Oh God, what's it going to happen?" You know, it's not going to help.
But even in your situation, in your storm, your recent storm, Mike, when you're trying to get your head in a good position, but you saw the circumstances around you, they weren't improving. At that moment, at least with your with Debbie.
No,
it's hard to get your head into making, well, God, this is coming together. And it seems like it's actually drawing further apart.
Well, yes, but that's what happened in the situation until I got to the point of acceptance. Okay, I accept this situation. This is what it is. Then I stopped trying to change it. And then God brought good out of it. While I was still trying to change it and fight for it and do all my stuff and all the emotions associated with that, I didn't leave any room for God in it initially. When I got to the point where, okay, I give up, and I felt the Father show me, look, this isn't going to change, then I accepted, and then I didn't obstruct, and I didn't try and hinder, and I just worked it through and got a separation order and sorted everything out. And then from that point, I was then in a different mindset, and I wasn't fighting, I wasn't struggling. I got to a place of rest in it, even though I still didn't want it, but I had changed in my heart towards it, even though I still didn't want that situation. I wasn't fighting, and I wasn't feeling, and I wasn't anxious, and I wasn't frustrated. I changed. The situation never changed, but I did in it. And I felt God with me in it, even though it was like, if I'm really honest, I would have still said, God, can't you do something to change this the way I want it changed? But actually, that requires somebody else to come into agreement with that. And they weren't going to. But I felt different after probably 3 months of going through the emotions of the grief and all of the things. I got to the point where, okay, this isn't going to change. I accept it. No, I'm changing to feel differently about that. And then God brought something better out of it. Now, I know it's not the same situation, because in this situation, you know, you are not going to feel good because of the danger to your granddaughter, you know, but that doesn't mean that you can't come a place of trusting God is going to protect your granddaughter. But to do that, your mindset in it, probably you have to deal with all of the negativity of the things you're feeling to get to the point where, okay, right now, we accept this situation. We're going to do something to maintain God's protection in this situation until this situation changes eventually.
Mike, quick question.
Yeah.
Now, you said unless you change your reality, choose another reality. So they're anticipating the worst, but you have to anticipate that God is going to work in the situation. Now, would it help, or will it help, that because they can't imagine in the circumstances there, and they can't choose another reality, your support group chooses another reality for you, that God's power is going to work in this situation, and that is the best outcome, and they hold on to that, because there's power.
Oh yeah, definitely we can support and encourage each other, you know, in it, because sometimes it's very, very hard when you're in the midst of something.
Yep.
You know, and definitely encouraging and supporting each other when at times things are just, you know, too volatile and too difficult and unstable, and all the double-mindedness that comes into that, wavering and going from one thing to another, all of that. Yeah, other people can help bring us to a place of, okay, helping in it, carrying each other's burdens, supporting each other, encouraging one another in it, definitely. But everyone eventually has to choose to deal with their own emotions and their own thoughts towards it, and change the negative thoughts. Say, well, how do you change them? Well, you've got to choose to change them. It's not just going to disappear. You have to choose. I am not going to think this way anymore. I'm not going to think the worst. I'm going to choose to think the best, and choose to accept that God wants the best out of this. And God is good, and he's never changed being good. But God is not a fairy with a magic wand, you know, just okay, the judge is going to change his mind in an instant. You know, God can't manipulate somebody. But if you continue to trust in God's provision and blessing and protection, then things can change in the future, and you'll look back and think, yeah, God was there. It just took longer than I thought it might do, or it took a change of something might happen in it. You know, but it's hard, and you know, I really feel for you, and I'm really sorry that you're having to go through this, and that your granddaughter and son are also. You know, it must be really, really hard. You know, but you know, I've had similar things with one of my grandchildren who's going through a very difficult time, and you know, it's not what you want, and you know, but I can't change it. All I can do is, God, protect her. Don't let anything serious happen to her. But when someone makes a choice, and they make choices to do things, God can't just say, you're not doing that. You can't do it, because they're making the choice to do it. You know, but even if they do make a bad choice, I want God's to still bring something good out of that choice. And I still want God's protection ultimately, so that, you know, something very serious doesn't happen in the situation. You know.